All right, welcome back to KP Unpack. This is my opportunity every week to ask KP Reddy, the CEO and founder of KP Ready Co, and also the founder of Shadow Ventures. Hey, KP, when you posted that on LinkedIn, what were you thinking? Obviously, that's a little bit of tongue in cheek, but I do get the opportunity to join KP Ready every week to break down some of the things that he posts on LinkedIn. And if you're not following KP on LinkedIn, you should be. You just go to KP and REDDY, KP Ready on LinkedIn. You can follow him. He's maxed out on his connections there. So the follow button is your only opportunity. But he posts two or three times a day. I was going to say a week, two or three times a day on LinkedIn. And all of his posts are insights from the AEC world. There may be some things that relate to startups or venture capital. There may be some things about operations and emerging technologies, but it's all around how we design, build, develop materials that go into it, operating and owning in the built environment. And there's a lot of great information, a lot of great insights there. So KP and I come here every week to unpack one of those posts. So KP, great to see you again. Thanks for joining
Good,
me.
good to see you, Jeff.
And you're in a different location.
I am
No, well, I
now.
guess you were there last week as we were recording, but we had
Yeah,
some technical issues last week.
yeah. Dang internet. All
Well,
better
it's
now.
just this new technology, the
All
internet.
better now.
Well, the just as we're recording this, just a couple of days ago, you posted something that generated a lot of discussion on LinkedIn about construction technology. So, as usual, I will read through the post, and then we'll come back and we'll unpack it. We'll see what's behind this particular post. So it goes like this: if you're following along at home, and maybe you're listening, I don't know what year it is when you're listening to this, 2027. Go back to about February 12th, 2025, and you'll find this post. It goes like this. In construction tech, there's a glaring, massive business opportunity. It's a pretty simple concept: the system integrator. Construction companies do not have the resources to deploy innovation on a project by project basis at scale. Startups need to build innovative products they can't handhold. Construction is very fragmented geographically, so all local sales and marketing teams are needed in every major market. With so many point solutions, the contractor needs an integrated approach to adopt. If you are interested, I'm interested. Put a pitch deck together, a go to market strategy, funding requirements, etc. Or consider this a free idea. I'm happy if someone does this because it's good for the industry. The idea established by Autodesk resellers, etc., don't get it. I have talked to them. They need a neatly packaged product. All right. I mean, there's a good bit to unpack here, but it, my very first reaction, my very first response after reading this doesn't seem like a new problem to me. Is this a new problem?
No, I don't think it's. I think Um, it's not a new problem. I think with especially startups in the tech industry, they sometimes lose sight of the market that they're serving. Right. This is still an industry that
Sure.
is, hey, we learn about new products via lunch and learns. It's
Hmm.
relationship. It's under resourced IT departments. That's not. What I would say is if people were just buying over the internet and didn't need a local office to talk to, why does Autodesk still have a reseller network?
Right.
Like, why did I mean they could just go direct, right? They're the behemoth. They're already there. Why do they have resellers? They have resellers because they realize that you need like a local presence to train people and be, hey, I'm having a problem. Okay, let me come over to your office and help you.
Hmm.
And so what that does is for startups, um, when they don't have a local point of presence and the ability to have a conversation, one, they're now just going to be a feature, right? They're not even a point solution. They're probably a point feature that is adopted by a person at that firm. And then if you look at a company that is trying to adopt multiple point solutions, how are they ever going to put all this stuff together?
Right.
They don't have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
And people think the big firms do, and so I think this is not like a new problem. I think it's just this idea that the industry has evolved in a place that's somewhere different than 10 years ago, which I don't think it has. We're in the same place, right? And I think the other thing people like to ignore is that we're a project-based business, you know. So I think even thinking about a systems integrator at an enterprise level. Look, at an enterprise level, we have accounting systems, all those things, right? Like that's probably not where help is needed. But if you're onboarding a new project and you're trying to understand the core objectives for the owner, and you're like, here's what we need to execute for the owner, here's what the owner wants, why wouldn't you have a systems integrator at that project meeting to say, okay, great, what are you using for design tools? What are you using for data collection? How are we going to do punch lists? And look at the data, basically the tech stack from beginning to end on the project, and be the person that integrates and orchestrates all that data. Because just like we've talked about in previous podcasts, our industry looks more like the movie industry than
Mm.
manufacturing. We're all getting together on a project basis to execute a project for the customer, which
Yeah.
is typically the owner or developer. The team is different every time. And so what happens is everybody shows up with a different toolbox, right?
Maybe.
And if
Maybe.
everybody shows up with a different toolbox every time, who's managing that workflow? Who's managing the integration of those data
Yeah.
sets?
So you're talking about on the level when you talk about it from a project to project basis, you're talking about it on the level of the entire team, not
Mm-hmm.
just the GC or what's happening in the architecture firm or the AE firm, however that's structured. It's almost at the um, if we look at the role of the owner's rep as a for instance, um, it might be at that level that someone is the systems integrator. Is that
Mm-hmm.
what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think owners reps, as I refer to as bad accountants, um, you know, they could be doing this. They don't have the capability.
Right.
So I think what you're really doing is saying, and it's one of these things where you just can't let people talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Hmm.
Data is so important. Data is the number one important thing, and there's not one person on the project that's doing anything with data. And I've talked to owners and developers about this. They're saying like, look, KP, if we're going to own this data, then maybe we should have someone on the team that is operating just like the owner's rep does on their behalf. There's a
Hmm.
systems integrator that is working on behalf of the owner, and and maybe tells the contractor, sorry, you don't get to use Procore on this project, or if you do, I need an API connection to your data. Because at the end of the
Interesting.
day,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's the owner's data. It's the owner,
Right.
the owner's of what the customer is what matters, right? Um, and so I think, and then now you look at like cybersecurity and all these other things. It's just,
Hmm.
the world has gotten very complicated. In many
Right.
ways, technology has gotten simple, but the world has gotten complicated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really interesting because when I facilitate our innovation leaders mastermind groups or our construction tech leaders mastermind groups, there's a lot of conversation around the data and around the
Hmm.
tools, but in there are some firms. I guess interestingly, I was earlier today, I was interviewing one of our early and mid career mastermind members, Nick Heim,
Hmm.
who um, who is moving into a role at his company of being sort of a director of innovation role, which means at some point Nick probably isn't in the early and mid career group anymore. He's probably in the innovation leaders group.
Hmm.
But we were talking about the fact that that's pretty rarefied air when you've got a a company that is investing in an innovation team, right?
Hmm.
We've got about over the span of our two innovation leaders mastermind groups, we've got a total of about 40 firms represented. in those two groups. That's a pretty small number when you compare it to, we'll just keep with North America. If you compare that number to the number of firms in North America, that's a very small swath, right? In some of those, every single one of the people in those groups are talking about data. They're the For those of you that are listening and may not be familiar, the Innovation Leaders Mastermind Group is Chief Innovation Officers, it's Director of Innovation, it's titles like that, VP of Innovation. They're all talking about data,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking about the tools that they use. There are a few out of that set of 40 or whatever the number is. It's pretty close to that. There are
Mm-hmm.
a few that have robust programs where they're tracking all of the tools, they're vetting all of the tools, they've got reporting on all of their tools, and you can go and pick from the tech stack basically. But that's even more rarefied air.
Yeah.
And then what you're talking about is pulling the whole project team together. So a step above or a layer above,
Mm-hmm.
one of these innovation leaders. Um, yeah,
Right. And what you
it's
just
pr-
described, right, about them vetting and doing all that, who are they doing
mhm.
it for? They're doing it for
In
themselves.
house. Yeah, exactly.
They're not doing it for their customer. They're not saying,
No,
hey,
no, not at all.
Mr. or Mrs. Customer, let me show you the UX of these two tools that are similar. And like, they're not doing any of that.
Right, right.
So I think when
No,
it
the only
comes to data, workflow, process, all of that, I think the owners, there's got to be, there's maybe a new role there.
yeah, yeah. Maybe the only thing that's coming out of that's customer facing
Mhm.
is a report on the AI tools that are being used, because
Mhm.
some of the clients, some of the customers of these firms are saying, "Hey, you've got to tell us every place, every way that you're
Mhm.
using our data or using data and using AI." That might be, this is just off the top of my head, but that might be the only thing that is headed outbound from
Mhm.
those efforts.
Yeah, and I think if you think about it too, right? When it, you know, you ask yourself, well, why aren't more tech companies selling owners, right? Other than
Hmm.
facilities management software, right? Facilities management
Sure.
software
Yeah.
going to owners.
Hmm.
Um, but why aren't they going to more owners, right? And I think you guys, we've talked about it this year. For me, is the year of the owners, right? I've been doing research, we're doing all this stuff, and spending a lot of even the mastermind group we now have are forming this big owners initiative and
Hmm.
all that stuff. So that's all happening. So definitely owners are top of mind for me. But if you're a technology company, if your direct customer is not an owner, you can't spend time with them. And really the your contractor or your design firm is really a channel to market, because if I go to one contractor and I can get on 20 projects, that's
Right.
very efficient. If I go to one owner, I'm probably going to get one project. That's less efficient. But
Hmm.
I just finished I put a deck together that's very focused on owners, and it's really to help them understand what technology is available
Hmm.
and then to start asking for it, because they don't know. They only know what their architects and engineers and contractors tell them exists.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And if there's something that exists, imagine this, that there's a tool that says, hey, an MEP engineer can design a building in a tenth of the time. Why would an MEP firm ever tell the customer this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if
Right.
I tell the customer, hey, I didn't know if you know there's a tool where MEP firm can do it in a tenth of the time, you should ask about it. Then all of a sudden the dynamic changes.
Sure. Yeah. But isn't there a pretty severe limit to that though? I mean, I guess I'm sort of thinking down the road,
Mhm.
you tell the owner that there's a tool that does this, and then the owner requires the MEP or tries to require the MEP to use that tool. Isn't there a severe limit to that? I mean, you could say, sure, well, does the MEP firm want the work or not? But there's such a there's such a pipeline. Pipeline's not the right word, but well, the MEP firm is using this tool because that's what they have enterprise agreements on. That's what
Hmm.
all their people are trained on. That's what their people learned on in school, and so on and so forth. So it seems like it would be a pretty high hurdle to think that an owner is going. Although I'll bring this back around because I can give an example of this happening. Um, it seems like a pretty high hurdle to think that an owner is going to force it down the other direction for a project. But when I was a recent graduate, about 120 years ago, um, we there was a whole row of machines in our office. I worked for a large firm in Chicago, and there's a whole row of machines in our office that were Sun Microsystems machines. And the only reason they were in the office was because a particular owner, and I probably can't say who, but a particular owner required that the software being run was software that was only running on those Sun machines.
Hmm.
Everything else, every other project in the office, um, every other client, etc. Well, no other client was
Hmm.
had that kind of requirement. It's just this one client, and for whatever reason, it predated my time there. But for whatever reason, we agreed to that,
Hmm.
and we worked on that software on those machines for that owner on
Right.
their project. I'm sure there's a promise of multiple projects, but I don't know
Yeah.
if that ever came to fruition.
Well, there's also a lock-in. If you're an architectural firm and a client says, "Hey, will you use this?" and you're the only one that uses it, they're not going to go
Sure.
anywhere else, right?
Well, yeah,
So I
until the
think
next firm does.
right till that, but at least you have some exclusivity for a period of
Competitive,
time.
yeah.
But I think the bigger thing, right, isn't that an owner says you shall do this, right? It's just the owner
Mhm.
being aware that these tools exist. The
Okay.
second piece of that is I think the design realm gets so fixated on if the owner knows we can do it cheaper, they're going to cut our fees.
Mhm.
What I will tell you is every owner I've talked to have never complained about design fees. Zero complaints. Their complaint is turnaround time, understanding
Sure.
schedule, um, the quality, the errors and omissions in the drawings that drive change orders. Because the design fee is a tiny, tiny number compared to
Right.
construction.
Yeah.
That's the number they care about.
Mhm.
That's what they really care about. And so I think this apprehension that like, oh, we're going off on a little bit apprehension, like, oh, I can do work in a third of the time or a tenth of the time,
Mhm.
immediately believes that the customer wants that the owner is going to say, oh, well, charge me a lot less. What they're going to say is like, fantastic, so you can move faster, you can
Mhm.
deliver better quality, so I'm not going to have change orders. That's all they care about. I mean, design fees are just such a rounding error on a project.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah, and I think that fear also comes from, or maybe even exacerbates,
Hmm.
or something, the 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 flaw in the business model. Right?
Hmm.
There's such a focus on the design side on the deliverable.
Yeah.
Right? As the stack of 24 by 36-inch pieces of paper that go out the door.
Hmm.
And if that's what you think the value of your work is, you've got a problem.
Hmm.
And this is not new either. I mean, this is a problem. So, what you're saying, that fear, well, if the owner learns about this tool, it allows us to go faster, they're going to cut our fee. I mean, they might, um, they might value getting there faster, but
Hmm.
the reality is you better embrace that,
Hmm.
because you always need, and I'm still, and I think we talked about this last week, maybe. I remember doing my internship and cranking out entire permit sets for tenant improvement projects, one project a day with a pencil, right, by
Hmm.
hand.
Hmm.
And then we had AutoCAD, and then we had Revit, to not as a sales pitch or a commercial for Autodesk, but I, I would argue that we really haven't advanced. Revit's a fancy electronic pencil still. We're not
Hmm.
utilizing it in the way it should be used. we need to learn the tools.
Hmm.
We need to learn how to leverage the tools for better generation of value.
Hmm.
And I think until that happens, it's always going to be a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a race
So
to commoditization.
don't you think there's this weird thing that I'm not going to design a building in the way it's going to be built? It's like fascinating, right? I'm
Hmm.
going to give you instructions, which is what CDs are. Plans and specs are instructions
Hmm.
on how to put something together. And so it's like if you go to IKEA and they just show you the finished product, and then they leave out, you like, you have to go search Home Depot for the screws and the tools,
The Allen
i.e.
wrench.
the means and methods, right? They just say, hey, here's all the here's the finished product, go figure it out. It's, I
Yeah.
mean, it's obtuse,
Hmm.
right? It's just absolutely obtuse. If you take someone off the street and say, here's how we design and build buildings, they would think you're like, it's like a joke, like, where's the candid camera? For
Yeah.
you youngins, there was a show called Candid Camera, blah blah. Google it. But
Google.
but, but it's just such an obtuse thing. Uh, and so anyway, so I think if we believe that technology, innovation, data are what matters, I feel like there's a person missing at that
Mm.
project. And I think that's an entire business. And I think it's an entire business that an owner is willing to pay for. They are willing to pay for that. The right owners, right?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, all of these conversations we have, right? That's always the case, right? The right owner. Um, and I think in most of the things that we talk about, there will be more and more right owners as things advance. But um, so, do you think if there's an entire business there, is it an entire new business, or is
Mm-hmm.
it something that becomes a department in some firm, or is it something
No,
that springs out of some firm?
I think it has to be a whole new business, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, I think you have to be technology agnostic,
Okay.
right? I think you can't
Hmm.
show up. The Autodesk people are going to show up and they're going to sell you Autodesk, whether it's the right thing or not,
Sure.
right? So I think you
Right.
have to be product agnostic. So that's an issue. Then I think you have to be team agnostic,
Okay.
right? So I don't think you can have an architecture firm offering this. I mean, maybe as a separate business, right? Once again, it's a separate company,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think it'd be the worst business for an engineering firm or a construction company to offer, to say, hey, we're going to be your project systems integrator, but we're a separate business. We can work on, if you're, DPR construction, it doesn't mean that you have to use DPR. It's independent,
Hmm.
but we're leveraging all the experience we have to work to help you guys do this. Um, I think if you can truly be independent, then yeah.
Why
But
doesn't it
because you have to
spring
be
out of the owner's
willing.
rep world?
I
I know you
mean,
love them.
they don't have the talent, right? I mean, they could launch a new business, but once
Yeah.
again, in the owner's rep world, you know, are they going to put their neck out there? I mean, the reason why people love the owner's rep
Well,
world is because
that's a
they
really
live,
fair point.
right?
Yeah.
They live with no liability. They live
Yeah.
in this world of no liability.
Yeah. That's true. That is true. That's that's sort of the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna have a new business, a new consultant come in to be the systems integrator,
Yeah.
um, play the systems integrator role. What what um, what are they going to need? You know, when they hit the ground running, or when they jump in and talk to their first owner or whoever it is. What is it that's going to be the hook or the main selling point that they're going to have ready to deploy?
I think they have to be, I almost feel like they have to be kind of like industrial engineering types, right?
Okay.
Hey, I'm going to sit down with your project teams. We're going to map out the process. We're going to map out the milestones. And then we're going to look at, like, from a data perspective, what data do you want along the project development phase, and what data do you want as an end state? right? It's kind of funny. Nick Durham on our team at Shadow, I was showing him a presentation, a BIM presentation from 20 years ago, maybe now, right? 15 years ago. And I'm walking him through it, and it was for a big hospital system um, in Cleveland. um, and at the end of it, it's like, hey, here's all this data. And then, by the way, at the end of your construction job, there's a box full of stuff. And I have a picture of a guy at the hospital with a box with all these drawings and all kinds of cut
Mm.
sheets and big cardboard box full of stuff. I
Yeah,
was
at
like, so
least.
as an owner, you get a big building and you get a box full of stuff. And that's kind of quote unquote your owner's manual for this $200 million asset you just built. This is the owner's manual you get to manage
Hmm.
it. And so Nick Durham was like, dude, this is so funny. He's like, surely it's not happening that way today. And I was like, don't call me Shirley, but airplane reference, kids.
Also Google it.
Also, airplane reference. But I think I just kind of laughed at it. I was like, Nick, I think things are mostly the same. I think that, maybe that
Yeah.
box of stuff at the end of the project closeout is maybe a PDF of all the stuff that went in the box, but it's not data. It's not data.
No, no. I mean, it went from that box of stuff to a bunch of binders,
Mm-hmm.
and then from binders to, I suppose, like a whole catalog of CD-ROMs or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, to now, I don't know. Maybe it is a giant folder on a Google Drive or something somewhere. Um, but yeah, I don't. I understand and I hear what our innovation leaders are talking about and the data they're collecting again for in-house for their
Yeah, for
purposes, not for
themselves.
their customer. Um, but I have not heard much about that data on the owner side,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I do find fascinating, right? Because it's one of my biggest beefs, and I have a
You have a lot
um,
of beefs.
I've got a lot of beefs. Where's the beef? Google it.
Yeah.
Um, Although you might want to be careful with that, but
Yeah. So.
I have I'm a thesis advisor again this semester, and I have a meeting with my thesis student here in a little while, and he's working on a architect as developer type idea. And one of the things that we have talked about is, as a developer, 2025 and beyond, or whatever. Well, go take a half step back, right? One of my biggest beefs with the architectural education, the engineering education, a lot of the educations that people that are headed into the AEC field, one of the things that's really lacking is a real understanding of how things are financed and developed and constructed and operated, including a developer's pro forma. Right? You need as an architect, you need to understand your client's pro forma. And when we're talking about this idea of data on the owner side, it only makes sense. For as much as developers know and as much as they put into their pro formas on the front end, they must surely be wanting or valuing the collection of data on the back end, or throughout the process, and then on the back end that they can implement
Mm-hmm.
for the next project and the next project.
And
So I think.
by the way, right? Like, just at a very simple level, since there might be two or three people that listen to the pod that are not from our industry, um,
I
would you
thought you were going to
buy?
say that we're not from our family.
Yeah, is a used if you're buying a used car and that
Hmm.
used car has a clean Carfax and meticulous maintenance records
Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah,
versus one with no Carfax and no maintenance records, are you willing to pay incrementally more or pay the same but choose the one that has better data associated with it?
sure. Yeah,
I mean, it's a no-brainer. And for a building, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At some level, I mean, a lot of the things that we've talked about over the the last 20 or 30 years, whether it's sustainability, resilience, whatever we're going to call it
Mhm,
now, some of these things and incentives and ideas that we've talked about, at the end of the day, maybe they get boiled down that way, right? It's like,
mhm,
which one of these would you choose? But at the end of the day, it's marketability.
mhm,
It's money. It's value, right? So, oh well, it's lead platinum or something like that. Okay, well, I understand that means it's certified, it's third partied. Um, we have the data on all of the materials. We have the data on all of the construction and things like that. So yeah, on an even scale, yeah, I'm going to pick that one over the other one, or maybe yeah, I'll pay more for that than I will for the one that's not, because I understand more about the operational future of this.
mhm,
So yeah, I think that makes complete sense, and I really do think that a lot of the things that we talk to eventually boil down to that on the owner operator side, owner
mhm.
and operations side.
No, 100%. So I think, like I said, I got some people reaching out. Most people like haven't gotten one pitch deck. I've had a lot of people reach out saying like, "Hey, I'm interested." And I've actually met with several people that said, "Hey, I'm interested." Like, I got more people saying, "Hey, if you're starting a new company,
Sure, yeah.
I'd like to come work for you." Not a lot of pitch decks, but I mean, look, I think it's interesting times, and I think I even look at it with my venture capital hat now. Is I'm almost not spending time with startups that are like, "Hey, we're gonna," I think I had another post, and maybe you should, where I talked about like, "Hey, we go from manual to digitization
Hmm.
to transformation." So digitization is taking what we manually did and putting it into a computer. Transformation with the same process. Transformation is digitization plus a new process, and disruption is transformation plus a new business model.
Hmm.
So a lot of what I've been focused on is the disruption, transformation with the new business model. And I think from an investing perspective, that's what I've been really kind of focused on, because I just think like, do we, you know, someone pitched me this thing the other day, like, oh, we're automating punch list items. I'm like, why do we have punch list items? Like, let's ask that question, right? And it's like, well, because I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just not have punch list items?
Hmm.
Let's solve that problem.
In a perfect world.
you know so whenever people are like, hey, I built a tool to better track problems, I'm like zero excited about that. I'm like, no, 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 I want you to use technology to actually solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean
want there
that
to
that's
be,
also a good highlighter, right?
right. I just think it's like, tell me your product will have will if I use your product, there'll be zero change orders, zero punch list items, zero energy consumption. Like, right? That's the idea. Is um that's real disruption, not like like this whole. I mean, like I said, and you're an architect. It's this whole idea like we're drawing drawings with no means and methods.
Hmm.
That at our next mastermind group, I think we should like. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go get like 20 Lego sets. I'm gonna pull all the instructions out of it, and I'm just gonna cut the finished product and put it on the table and say, "Go, go, go, guys, go do it."
Yeah.
It'll be a fun exercise.
You got, yeah.
Oh, by the
Now
way, here's the other thing I'm going to do. Each person only has a certain set of parts, sort of Legos, and they have to coordinate
it's
with
going
the
to be a
other,
team process.
right, team process, and they have to coordinate with the other three people. And one of them doesn't get to use their hands. They have to. There's only one person that's using their hands. The rest of them have to tell them how to do it.
Yeah. It's-
We should work on
pointing and
this. This would be a great workshop thing. It really would.
all right. Well, we're gonna do
Yeah.
this. Do our next in person in Phoenix. I mean, maybe Maybe we need
And
to jump on and have some Lego sets sent that direction.
yeah, and then the person representing the owner, we're just gonna blindfold. You just sit over there. We'll let you know when it's gonna be done,
Well, you
and
also
you'll find out at the end what it's gonna look like.
we're going to need to have some attorneys in the room as well.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I'm going to sue you. That doesn't look right.
And then I'll have some people dress up as like clouds and run around just like kick the tables over.
Throw buckets of water on the tables. This,
I'm telling you, like, we're joking, but this sounds like an amazing like.
well, I'm sitting here thinking it's like we actually have time to pull this off.
No, we definitely
Um,
need to do this. Get Ethan on it. Ethan will get it.
oh, he will. So if you're listening to this, I don't know. Uh, I would have to ask producer Ethan about our publishing schedule. But if this publishes before our next in-person mastermind meeting in Phoenix, and you're headed that way, be ready.
Yeah.
You're going to need a rain suit, some gloves, and an imagination. You might want to do some research about Lego sets. Know everything you can about popular Lego sets before you get there.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man. Like we're doing it.
Here we go.
Either we're doing it at the event or we're doing it at the bar later on that day.
Well, that's more appropriate because that gets another realistic element in there. Oh, wait.
every time you get it wrong, you have to take a shot.
Who's going to play OSHA?
uh,
Here we go.
doesn't it feel like designing and building a building if it was turned into a drinking game?
Well, I mean,
everybody,
again,
every time there's an RFI, everybody has to take a shot.
there's some level of realism in that.
I know the owner's taking a shot every time they get a change order across their
Well,
desk.
yeah, this is true. This is true. All right. Well, I need to do some Lego shopping now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. This idea is it is intriguing. So what KP and I have been talking about is his post or one of his posts from February 12th, I believe, 2025. It goes like this. In construction tech, there's a glaring, massive business opportunity. It's a pretty simple concept. The system integrator. Construction companies do not have the resources to deploy innovation on a project by project basis at scale. Startups need to build innovative products. They can't handhold. Construction is very fragmented geographically, so a local sales and marketing team is needed in every major market. With so many point solutions, the contractor needs an integrated approach to adopt. And then you go on to talk about people sending you pitch decks, which no one has yet. Um, so if you're out there, find this post. If you're a startup, if you're somebody that wants to start this, find this post on LinkedIn, reach out to KP and say, hey, here's my pitch deck. You need a pitch deck, a go-to-market strategy, and the funding requirements. And KP's interested in talking.
There you go.
All right. As always, I've been joined today for this conversation by KP Reddy. He's the CEO and founder of KP Reddy Co. and also the founder of Shadow Ventures. He posts several times a day on LinkedIn. You should be following him. KP Reddy, Reddy. Lots of insights from all different directions in AEC and having to do with the built environment. Everything from designing, constructing, owning, to operating in the built environment. And this is just another great example of one of those posts. And it's my opportunity every week to sit down and say, hey, what were you thinking? What was the inspiration for that particular post on LinkedIn? So, KP, thanks for joining me today. This has been fun.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, go get some Legos. And for those of you that are listening, thank you. We'll be back again next week with another episode of KP Unpacked. Thanks, everybody.